She was tossed into the dust like she meant nothing. The sun scorched her skin, and the wagon never stopped. But one man saw her, wealthy, widowed, and haunted, and he couldn't ride past. The girl hit the dirt hard. One moment she was crammed, between sacks of dry flour and dented tins, clutching a wooden doll missing one leg. The next, she was flying through the hot air like tossed cargo, landing with a thud that knocked the breath out of her. The wagon never stopped, not even a glance. Back, the driver flicked his reins, and the creaking wheels rolled farther into the golden horizon, disappearing behind a cloud of summer dust. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even stand up right away. She just lay there, arms scraped, dress torn, skin already stinging from the heat rising off the earth like steam. Her name was Ellie. She was 9, and she had just been discarded by the last people who had promised not to leave her. Somewhere out in the distance, a hawk circled high, its shadow gliding over the open field like it was hunting for something already half dead. Ellie rolled to her knees and pressed her hand against her ribs. The doll had snapped in half when she fell on it. She blinked down at its broken torso, then looked up at the road, as if maybe, just maybe, they'd changed their minds. But they didn't. They never did. Ellie's breath came slow. She'd known this was coming. Mr. and Mrs. Talbot had talked in low voices every night for the last 2 weeks, arguing about food, space, and how she talked too much about nothing. She hadn't eaten the day before, hadn't spoken either. It didn't help. That morning, they gave her half a biscuit and told her to sit tight. That was all. And then they threw her out like spoiled meat. She stood now, the summer sun glaring in her eyes, turning her scalp to fire. Her shoes were already cracked from miles of wear, and the hem of her dress dragged through dust and pebbles. There was no one else on the trail. Nothing but prairie, buzzards, and the faint shimmer of heat curling up from the dirt. She didn't cry. That part of her had burned out long before. Miles away, maybe 20, maybe less, a man named Levi Holcomb reigned, his horse beside a split-rail fence, wiping sweat from his brow. The richest man for 4 counties, Levi owned over 1,200 acres, 50 horses, and 5 barns. But it hadn't always been that way. Years ago, before the oil, before the rail contracts, before everyone called him Mr. Holcomb, he was just a wiry boy with a busted rifle and a dying mother. Life hadn't handed him wealth. He'd carved it out of the ground and made the world notice. But for all the money in his pockets and land under his boots, Levi was alone. His wife, June, had died 3 years earlier, in a fire no one ever talked about. Since then, his home had felt too quiet, too big. He kept his help hired and distant, never letting anyone stay too long. People respected him. No one pitied him. That was how he liked it. Until that day, when he saw the child. Levi wasn't supposed to be out that way. He was headed to a neighboring ranch for a cattle trade, cutting cross through empty land to save time. He might have ridden right past her if not for the glint, sunlight bouncing off the metal hook of the broken doll's leg. He slowed his horse, eyes narrowing. There she was, standing like a ghost, thin arms hanging limp, eyes like smudges on a sun-bleached face, and a wobble to her knees like she hadn't drunk water in too long. Her lips were split, her hair was matted, her shadow stretched out behind her like a thread unraveling into nothing. "Hey," Levi said, nudging his horse closer. "You all right, girl?" Ellie didn't speak. She just stared at him, arms clutching the broken doll like it was worth more than gold. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the dust. "Where's your folks?" She blinked. "Did you wander off from your wagon?" She shook her head once, then again, slower. Her bottom lip trembled just slightly before she stiffened again. "Someone hurt you?" No answer. Just a long silence. The kind that makes your throat dry even when your mouth is shut. Levi glanced down the trail. No wagons, no riders, nothing but prairie. The heat pressed on his back like a hand. He looked at her again, and something in him twisted. A memory flashed. His wife's hands, once tender on a child-sized pillow. The cradle that still sat in the attic, covered in a white sheet he hadn't dared lift since the fire. "You hungry?" he asked, softer now. This time, she nodded. He offered a hand. "Come on, let's get you some water." She stared at the hand for a long time before placing her own in it. It was small, filthy, but warm. That night, Levi didn't sleep. He'd brought her back to the ranch, wrapped her in a clean blanket, given her fresh bread and goat's milk. She hadn't said a word all evening, just sat in the corner of the kitchen near the stove, watching him like an animal unsure whether he'd strike or soothe. He hadn't pressed her. His housekeeper, Martha, was the first to speak what was on his mind. "She's not just some runaway," Martha muttered while cleaning up the dishes. "Look at the bruises on her arms. That child's been through more than hunger." Levi didn't answer. He knew it, felt it in his bones. But he also knew something else. There was going to be trouble. Men who throw children out of wagons don't like questions, and if they found out she'd survived, they might just come back, looking to finish what they started. Still, he couldn't send her away. The next morning, he rode into town to speak with Sheriff Burrow. The lawman was aging and half-blind in one eye, but he was sharp as a tack when it came to sniffing out lies. Levi told him what little he knew. Burrow nodded, chewed the end of a pencil, and said, "You keep her close. I'll ask around." Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Ellie wandered the house like a ghost. She didn't speak, didn't cry, but she watched Martha scrub vegetables, watched the rooster strut across the yard, watched the horses twitch in their stalls like they knew a storm was coming. That afternoon, a knock echoed through the house. Martha opened the door. A tall, narrow-faced man stood on the porch, flanked by a heavy-set woman with tight lips and eyes like two rusted nails. Behind them, a wagon rattled in place, pulled by a scrawny mule. "We're looking for a child," the man said, eyes sliding past Martha's shoulder. "Ours got lost on the road. Mighty upset about it." Martha stiffened. "What child?" The woman answered this time, voice like vinegar. "A girl. Dark hair. Quiet. Had a broken doll." Levi stepped into the doorway before Martha could speak. His eyes locked with the man's. The stranger didn't flinch, but something in his jaw twitched. "She wandered onto my land," Levi said evenly. "Looked half dead." The man shrugged. "We're here to take her back." Levi didn't move. "She say she wanted to go back," the woman snorted. "She's 9. She don't get to say." Martha stepped beside Levi. "She's asleep, and you won't be speaking to her till we figure who you really are." The man's eyes narrowed. "You saying we ain't her kin?" "I'm saying the sheriff's got questions," Levi replied. "And until we get some answers, she stays." The man stepped forward. Levi didn't. He just stood there, still, quiet, like a man used to facing down things bigger than himself and not blinking once. After a long, tense second, the man stepped back. "You'll regret this," the woman hissed. They turned and left, Wagon rattling back down the road like it carried all the snakes in the world. Martha shut the door hard. "They'll be back." Levi didn't answer. He looked down the hallway, where Ellie stood barefoot in her nightgown, doll clutched in her arms, and fear in her eyes like thunder waiting to strike. The dust was still thick in the air when Levi stumbled backward, the girl's sobs still ringing in his ears. He'd scooped her up off the dry dirt like a broken sparrow, light as if her bones had given up carrying any weight at all. She hadn't said her name, and he hadn't asked. Some silences needed time to unravel. He just carried her, gently, across the ranch yard, and into the house where sunlight filtered through dusty windows, and the smell of cornbread lingered from the morning. He didn't have much furniture, just a long pine table, one chair by the fire, and a cot he never quite bothered to replace after his wife died. But that day, he laid the girl on that cot like she was something precious, something fragile, and for the first time in a long time, he moved like he had a purpose. She slept. For 3 days straight. On the first night, he stayed up with her, pulling a stool close to the cot and listening to her breathe, half afraid she'd stop. On the second, he moved her arms gently, making sure nothing was broken. Her skin was a patchwork of old bruises and healing welts, but there was a strength in her even as she slept, a kind of stubbornness in how her jaw stayed tight and her fingers curled into fists. By the third, she was muttering in her sleep. Nonsense mostly, but once he thought he heard a name. June. When she finally woke up, her eyes darted around the room like a wild thing's, her mouth pulling tight. She sat up too fast and swayed, clutching her stomach. Levi offered her a tin cup of water. She didn't take it at first. She just looked at him like he was a stranger speaking a language she'd never learned. Then she snatched the cup and drank like her life depended on it. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said simply. "You're safe here." She wiped her mouth with her sleeve and didn't answer. Instead, she stared past him, toward the window, toward the dry horizon that seemed to stretch forever. Finally, she croaked, "Where am I?" "My ranch, 10 miles east of Sparrow Ridge." He paused. "You got a name?" She looked down at her knees, bony things jutting through the too big dress he'd draped over her the night before. "June," she mumbled. "Well, June," he said softly. "I'm Levi. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. You don't have to talk until you're ready." She didn't say anything else that day, but when he left the room, she followed. When he chopped wood, she sat on the porch and watched. When he fed the horse, she trailed behind, silent and barefoot. And that night, when the coyotes howled far off in the hills, she crept into the corner of the room and cried so softly, Levi almost missed it. He didn't say a word, just sat in his chair by the fire, staring at the flames, listening. The days passed slow but steady. June still hadn't spoken much, but she'd started doing little things, folding her blanket in the morning, helping him sweep the porch, offering him water without being asked. She watched everything. The way he fixed fences, the way he fed the chickens, the way he talked to the animals like they were old friends. Then one afternoon, as the sun began to dip low and golden over the fields, she asked him the one question he hadn't expected. "Why'd you pick me up?" Levi looked at her from where he was tightening a saddle strap. "Because no one else was going to." June bit her lip. "They said I was cursed, that if they kept me, bad things would happen. You believe that?" She looked away. "Sometimes. They said my ma died 'cause of me. My pa too. Then the preacher said I brought hunger on the wagon. Folks stopped talking to me. I didn't cry when I got beat, so they said I didn't have no soul." Levi set down the strap and walked toward her. "You think I look cursed?" She shook her head. "I took you in, and nothing bad's happened to me. Matter of fact, it's been quieter. Feels like something's starting again. Something that stopped when my wife died." June stared at him, eyes wide and wet. "You're not cursed, June. You're just a girl who's been through more than most folks should." She didn't say anything, but she stood a little taller after that. Weeks passed. June began to smile, only a little, and only when she thought he wasn't looking. She helped him tend the garden, water the horses, even started reading from one of the dusty books on the shelf. Levi found himself talking more, telling her stories about when he was a boy, or the funny things his wife used to do, like burn every biscuit but pretend it was on purpose. June listened like it all mattered, like every word was a coin she was storing away. Then, one morning, as Levi was tying up a sack of feed, he saw something in the distance. A figure on horseback, moving fast. He squinted, stepped off the porch, June just behind him. The rider was tall, lean, his coat whipping in the wind. He pulled to a stop so hard the dust spun up around him like smoke. His eyes were sharp, his face sunburnt, and he had a way of sitting that made Levi's stomach twist. You Levi Colburn, the man barked. I am. What's your business? The chair. Man looked past Levi, straight at June. She froze. That's my property. Levi blinked. Beg pardon, the girl. June. He spat her name like it burned his tongue. She ran off with our supplies, stole a horse. You're harboring a thief. June stepped behind Levi, her fingers grabbing his shirt. She didn't steal anything, Levi said firmly. She was thrown out. I saw it myself. The man smirked. You saw what you wanted to see. That girl's been trouble since she was born. She don't belong to you. She don't belong to anyone. The man tilted his head. We'll see what the sheriff says. I got papers. He reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled slip. Levi took it, scanned it. His stomach sank. It wasn't legal adoption, not by law, but it was enough. A signed contract from her parents, given to the preacher of that wagon train. It called her a ward, property, transferable. Don't matter what you believe, the man said. Law's the law. I'm taking her back. No, June whispered behind Levi, but her voice shook. Not without a fight, Levi said, and even as he said it, he knew what it meant. The man narrowed his eyes. Then I'll be back, with the sheriff. He kicked his horse and rode, off in a storm of hooves and dust. Levi didn't move. June clutched his shirt tighter, her whole body trembling. You won't let him, will you? She asked. Levi turned, knelt in front of her. No, but it won't be easy. She nodded slowly. I can help. Levi smiled, just a little. I reckon you can. But as the sun dipped low again and the long shadows of evening crept over the land, Levi knew deep down that trouble was rolling in. And it wasn't just the man. It was whatever deal had been made to keep June in chains before he found her. And that deal wasn't finished yet. The day after the rider's threat, Levi rode into Sparrow Ridge before the rooster crowed. The sun hadn't yet clawed over the hills, and the only sounds on Main Street were the creaking of old signs and the occasional wind dragging dust across plank sidewalks. He left June behind, promising he wouldn't let anyone take her. She believed him, but he saw fear in her eyes, and that tore at him more than the threat of any lawman. Sparrow Ridge wasn't a big town, but it had just enough to hold a man accountable if the wrong papers reached the wrong hands. Sheriff Tully was one of the few lawmen Levi still trusted. He'd fought in the same regiment during the war, and though life had broken them in different ways, they carried a shared code. Tully had a limp and a white streak through his hair. That hadn't been there the last time Levi saw him, but his eyes were just as sharp. Levi stepped into the sheriff's office, ducking under the low doorframe. Tully was already at his desk, sipping coffee out of a chipped tin mug, eyes lifting without surprise. You look like you ain't slept. I ain't, Levi said. Tully set the mug down. This about the girl? Levi blinked. You already heard? Word travels fast when it's dragged behind a man like Russell Briggs. Levi felt a sour twist in his gut. Briggs is the one that rode out to my place. Tully leaned back. He came in last night waving some paper round, like it was dipped in gold. Says you're harboring his ward. Claims she stole off his wagon train with supplies and a horse. She didn't steal a thing. She was thrown off. I saw it. Tully rubbed his temple. I don't doubt that. But the paper's muddy, Levi. It ain't adoption, but it's got just enough signatures and just enough preaching ink on it that I can't toss it out the window. She's a child, Levi snapped. I know, but if he files, it'll go to Judge Stratham in Bitter Creek. That man sees everything in ink and paper, not bruises and fear. What can I do? Tully sighed. Truth? Keep her hidden, or bring her in voluntarily and make your case. But if Briggs files formal, the judge will send a marshal. Levi stood still, jaw tight. Levi, Tully added, you ever think maybe it's time you had someone with you out there? You've been alone too long. Folks are starting to whisper. What kind of whispers? One's about a man burying grief in silence and land, till he starts digging holes he don't know how to fill. Levi didn't answer. He turned, nodded once, and stepped out without another word. Back at the ranch, June hadn't stayed idle. She was mending the old chicken coop with more focus than most men used cutting wood. Her brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. When she saw Levi ride in, she ran to the gate. "You talked to the sheriff?" she asked. "I did." June waited, hands wringing together. "Is he going to come for me?" "He might, but we're not going to let him." Levi spent that day preparing, not just physically, but in his soul. The thought of losing June stirred something he didn't know still lived in him. A fire, a purpose. He'd buried his wife 5 years back under the cottonwood tree at the edge of the field. Since then, life had been dirt, dust, and waiting. Now, he had something to defend again. He built a second door brace, barred the windows with reclaimed lumber, and showed June how to slip out the back pasture through the gulch if she needed to run. She nodded at every instruction, memorizing every turn. But there was something in her eyes that said she wasn't going to run. That night, they sat by the fire. June held one of Levi's old books in her lap, but wasn't reading. Her eyes were distant. Finally, she asked, "Do you think God hates me?" Levi blinked. "Why would you say that?" "'Cause everybody else did. Every time someone died on the wagon, they'd look at me like it was my fault. The preacher said I was punishment for my ma's sins. Said I was born wrong." Levi's chest tightened. "You ain't born wrong. People are." "My ma. She was real quiet. But she used to sing sometimes, only when we were alone. One day, she sang too loud, and the preacher said she was filled with vanity. She cried after that, a lot." Levi swallowed hard. "And your pa?" June shrugged. "Didn't really have one. Mama said he was gone before I was born." She wouldn't say more. "Then you're not cursed. You're a survivor." She nodded slowly but didn't smile. "I wish she were here. I wish my wife were here," Levi said. "You'd have liked her. She had a temper like a thunderstorm, but she could make anything grow. Even in that dry patch out back." June looked toward the window, where the garden sat in moonlight. "Maybe I could try planting something, to see if I can make things grow." Levi placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You already have." 2 days passed with no sign of Briggs. Levi hoped maybe the man had bluffed or gotten distracted. But on the third day, just before noon, he heard the hoofbeats. Not one horse, 3, and a wagon. He walked out onto the porch, rifle resting loosely in his arms. Briggs sat on his mare, smirking. Behind him, 2 rough-looking men flanked a wagon with a tall canvas covering its sides. "Morning," Briggs called. "Not your land," Levi said plainly. "Not for long." Briggs dismounted, unrolling a scroll of parchment. "Got the papers filed. Sheriff Tully signed off. Marshal's on his way from Bitter Creek. Should be here tomorrow. But I figured, being a charitable man, I'd give you one last chance to hand over the girl without trouble. She's not yours. I paid for her, fed her, gave her a place when her own wouldn't. You think you can undo that with a little kindness and a few hot meals? I think you're going to have to walk through me." Briggs took a step forward. "You're an old man, Levi, and alone." "Not as alone as I was." Briggs paused. "You really think this is going to end in your favor?" "I don't care how it ends. I care how it's remembered." They stared each other down, the silence hanging between them like stretched wire. Then Briggs turned, spat in the dirt, and signaled to his men. "You got till tomorrow. After that, she's mine again." The wagon turned and creaked back down the hill. Levi didn't relax until the sound of hooves vanished. Inside, June stood in the hallway, gripping the frame of the door. "They're really coming." "They are. Then I won't run." Levi looked at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "I know you won't," he said. That night, he gave her something he hadn't touched in years. A locket, tarnished and old, with a picture of his wife on one side and a lock of hair on the other. She used to say, God put children in the world as reminders, he said, of what we were, what we still could be. June opened it with care, ran her thumb along the glass. She was pretty. She'd say the same about you. They slept in shifts, Levi with his rifle propped by the door, June curled under, a blanket in the parlor, but neither of them truly rested. The night was thick with tension, the air charged, and just before dawn, the dog barked once, then fell silent. Levi shot up, heart racing. He stepped onto the porch as the first light cracked over the hills, but the yard was empty until he looked down and saw a small wooden box on the step. Inside, a bloody strip of fabric, one he recognized as torn from June's dress. He turned. She was gone. The box slipped from Levi's hand and hit the porch with a thud, the strip of bloody cloth folding in on itself like a silent scream. His breath caught in his chest. He hadn't heard a struggle. No screams, no broken glass or signs of forced entry. The dog, old Toby, was lying still by the gate, unmoving, his muzzle bloodied, likely struck down in a single silent blow. Levi's rifle was still within reach, but it felt useless in that moment. Whoever had come for June had done so while he was breathing, watching, waiting, and he hadn't stopped them. That was the worst of it. He bolted inside, calling her name. June, no answer. He tore through the house, blankets tossed, back door swung open, the gulch path undisturbed. It wasn't just that they took her, it was how. Quietly, surgically, as if mocking the very protection he promised her. When Levi circled back to the front porch, a second box was waiting. Smaller. He hadn't heard it placed there. His throat tightened as he knelt and opened it. With shaking hands, inside was a folded note, in blocky, crude handwriting. Trade's still on. Bring her back, no trouble, or we sell her again. This time farther west. One more sunrise. There was no signature, no location, but Levi already knew where to go. The Briggs outfit had left tracks wide and deep, clear as spilled ink on sand. Their wagon had gone north toward the abandoned mill on the outskirts of Sparrow Ridge. Levi had once courted his wife near that mill, back when the water wheel still turned and the air smelled of cedar. Now it was a hollow skeleton, used by squatters and drifters to play out their filth. If they had her there, he'd find her. He saddled up without eating, without thinking, rifle strapped to his back, revolver holstered at his hip. He didn't pack food or water. This wasn't about surviving. It was about getting her back. As he rode through the baking heat, his thoughts turned inward. To that day he buried his wife. To the year he spent not speaking to another soul. To the moment June stepped into his life and somehow rewired all the silence into something human again. That girl, who had flinched at shadows and wept in her sleep, had stood beside him ready to fight. And now she was gone because of him. The trail wound through dry riverbeds and hills bleached under the summer sun. Buzzards circled high above, casting slow-moving shadows that crawled across the trail like omens. At the crest of a ridge, he dismounted and surveyed the land. There it was, the old mill, slumped like a broken jaw, windows boarded, wheel missing a tooth. Smoke curled lazily from a chimney that shouldn't have had fire in it. 3 horses were tethered out front. 1 wagon, same as before. The canvas flapped in the breeze, its edge stained with something dark. He crept down the hill, sticking, to the scrub and dry brush, rifle in hand, eyes on every door. He spotted the first guard leaning against the wall, chewing something, rifle slung too low across his shoulder. Levi raised his gun and fired once. The man dropped without a sound. Seconds later, shouts came from inside. He ran. The front doors burst open and 2 men stepped out. Briggs was one of them. The other, a wiry fellow with a scar across his eye. Levi fired again, missed the first shot but hit the second in the chest. Briggs ducked back, screaming. Levi charged forward, swinging the butt of his rifle into the doorframe and shoving his way in. The inside of the mill was dim, the air thick, with dust and the stink of sweat and kerosene. A lantern had been kicked over, and flames licked along the far wall. Somewhere, in the back, he heard a scream. June. He kicked down the nearest door and swept the room. Empty. Then another. Empty. Then he found her, tied to a post with her hands above her head, barefoot and bruised, her face dirtied, but her eyes burning with fury. When she saw him, her knees nearly gave out. He rushed to her, slashed the ropes with his knife. "You came," she whispered. "I promised," he said. Suddenly behind them, a gun cocked. "Step away, Levi, Briggs." He stood at the doorway, revolver aimed dead center. His shoulder was bleeding from the earlier fight, and his mouth curled into a grimace of pain. "You're a fool," Briggs hissed. "You're gonna die over a girl that don't even belong to you. She's not yours. She never was." Levi stepped in front of June. "She's not property," he said. "She's not for sale, and she's not afraid of you anymore." "She should be," Briggs fired. But June had already kicked Levi's leg, sending him sideways. The bullet missed, his chest by inches, and slammed into the wall. Levi rolled, drew his revolver, and fired twice. One hit. Briggs staggered back, hand clutched to his side, then dropped to one knee. "You think this is over?" he gasped. "There's others like me, more papers, more buyers. You think you saved her. You just started a war." Levi stepped closer. "Then I'll fight every one of you." Briggs tried to lift his revolver again, but Levi kicked it from his hand. The man collapsed. Levi turned to June, picked her up, and carried her out as the fire in the mill crept along the beams. He didn't look back. Outside, he helped her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and held her close as they rode away from the burning ruin. They rode hard and didn't stop until dusk, making it back to the ranch just as the first stars pricked the sky. June didn't speak for the first few hours, but when they reached the porch, she touched his arm. "Why'd you do it?" she asked quietly. "Because you were mine to protect. Not because of blood, but because no one else would." She nodded and leaned into him, the weight of it all finally crashing into her small frame. They sat in silence a long time, but silence no longer felt empty. That night, Levi didn't sleep. He sat by the door, rifle across his lap, watching the horizon for shapes that didn't belong. He knew it wasn't over. Briggs had money, influence, friends. There were others who saw children as things to trade and own, but he also knew something else. He wasn't alone anymore. And the next time someone came knocking, they'd find a man who had something to lose again. And that made him more dangerous than ever. Morning came soft and gold across the prairie, and for the first time in weeks, Levi didn't feel like it was a borrowed light. He stood by the fence post, hands clenched tight around a steaming cup of coffee, watching June brush down his mare with careful strokes, the same way she might handle a child. Her hands, bruised and sore, moved with a steadiness he admired more than anything he could say. She hadn't cried since they escaped the mill, hadn't whimpered or asked why it happened. She had simply pressed forward, doing the work that needed doing, just like him. But Levi knew better. He knew what it was to carry a silence that weighed more than words could hold. He hadn't told her about Briggs's last words, about the papers, about the possibility that the danger wasn't gone. He told himself he was protecting her. The truth was, he was still trying to protect himself from hope. He had lost too many people in his life to trust good things when they came. That morning, he saddled up early and rode into town. June had asked to come with, but he told her no, gently. She didn't press it. She had learned not to, which made it hurt even more. As he trotted down Main Street, he kept his head low. Even without saying a word, the town seemed to know. The stares were longer, the nods more solemn. He tied his horse outside the post office and strode toward the sheriff's office. Sheriff Malloy was seated at his desk, boots kicked up, chewing a matchstick. He looked up as Levi entered. "You look like you've been dragged behind a freight wagon," Malloy said, standing up and brushing crumbs off his vest. Heard about the trouble. You want to tell me what happened? Levi didn't bother sitting. Briggs is dead. Took him down at the old mill. Malloy arched an eyebrow. You shoot him? He drew first. Malloy nodded slowly, studying Levi. Was there anyone else? 2 men. One's dead. Don't know about the other. Might have run. They had her, June, tied up. He was going to sell her again. The sheriff let out a long breath and pushed back his hat. You have any proof of that? There's a ledger. Or there was. I saw it in his wagon. Names, trades, towns, probably burned up with the mill. Malloy cursed under his breath, then caught himself. Sorry. Listen, Levi, I believe you, I do, but without a body, and without that ledger, I can't hang a man for hearsay, especially one who's already dead. Levi's jaw tightened. That ain't what I came here for. I came to ask for help. Help with what? Protecting her. She's not safe. Briggs said there were others. Men like him, with papers, buyers, names. If they find out he's dead and she's still alive, they'll come. Malloy was quiet for a long time, then finally said, I can send word out to the Marshals, maybe even the Pinkertons, though I doubt they'll care about a single girl this far out. They'll care when they come for her and someone ends up dead, Levi said, turning for the door. Levi, Malloy said behind him, you know how this works. You take in a girl like that, no records, no blood claim, and someone with money and paper can make trouble. If she had a birth certificate, a church registry, something, we could make it stick. She has me, Levi said. That might not be enough next time. When he got back home, he found June sitting on the porch, a rag doll in her lap, sewing shut a tear in the arm. She didn't look up. I figured you went to see the sheriff, she said softly. I did. Did he believe you? He did. But he didn't promise nothing, did he? Levi didn't answer. She nodded and set the doll aside. I heard horses. What? This morning. Before you got back, I was feeding the chickens. Thought I saw a man watching from the edge of the property. When I looked again, he was gone. Levi's stomach turned. Why didn't you come get the rifle? I didn't want to scare the girls. The girls? She nodded toward the barn. Levi frowned and followed her, stepping into the dim, hay-scented air. And there they were, 2 girls, both younger than June. One maybe 6, the other no older than 3, curled up in the hay, faces dirty, clothes torn. The older one had eyes like stone, hard, flat, unreadable. The younger girl looked too tired to be afraid. Where did they come from? Levi asked. They showed up right after you left, knocked on the door. I thought maybe they'd run from Briggs too. Did they say anything? Just a name. May. That's the older one. The little one don't speak. Levi crouched beside them. May? The girl blinked at him but didn't respond. Do you know where you came from? She stared at him, then slowly shook her head. Were you with Briggs? This time her jaw tightened. Yes, she said, but not anymore. Levi stood. We can't keep them. June stepped between him and the girls. They got nowhere else to go. We don't even know if someone's looking for them. So, we let them go, she snapped. Let them end up in the same hands again? He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what she wasn't saying. She saw herself in them. He sighed. All right, but they stay in the barn, for now, and we keep watch. That night, Levi sat up again, rifle in hand, eyes watching the tree line. The wind was warm, but he still felt a chill. Just before midnight, he heard it, hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate. Someone riding in quiet. He stood, walked down from the porch, and waited, rifle low. A man stepped from the shadows. He was tall, dressed in black, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His horse stood still behind him, silent. Evening, the man said. State your business. I'm looking for something that was lost. Levi's finger tightened on the trigger. A girl, the man continued. 2 of them, actually. About yay high. Dark hair. One don't speak. Last seen in company of a girl named June. You a lawman? Levi asked. The man smiled. I'm what you might call a collector. I keep track of things that don't belong to no one. And those girls, they were spoken for. Not anymore. The man's smile faded. You misunderstand. They're not yours to keep. And neither is the one you call June. You've got 3 runaways. All marked, all catalogued. Not by me. By the right people. I don't give a spit who you think is right. The man stepped forward. You can hand them over quiet, or things can go the hard way. Levi didn't raise the rifle, not yet. You come back tomorrow, he said, with paper, with proof, with a badge, and we'll talk. The man's smile returned, colder this time. You've got till sundown, then we stop talking. He turned and vanished into the dark, like he'd never been there. Levi walked back to the house, heart pounding. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Dawn didn't come with birdsong that morning. It came with silence, thick, unnatural, like the land itself was holding its breath. Levi sat at the kitchen table sharpening a dull knife, the rasping metal whispering through the stillness. June stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, eyes scanning the trees like she could make that man disappear by staring hard enough. The 2 younger girls were asleep upstairs, curled together like kittens, unaware of the world tightening its grip around them. But Levi knew there was no more room for waiting. He spoke without looking up. We pack light. We're leaving by mid-morning. June turned. Where? North. There's a pastor up in Eagle Hollow. Runs a mission for girls like them. Like you. He's clean. Trusted. Sheriff Malloy vouched for him. June shook her head. You're sending us away? I'm getting you somewhere safe. I thought we were safe here. We were. Until last night. She walked to the table and placed both palms on it. They'll follow us. I know, but there'll be more help that way. I can't hold off a whole ring of slavers with a rifle and a worn fence line. He met her gaze and saw her defiance, the same storm she'd had in her eyes since the first day. But this time it came with tears she wouldn't let fall. I'm not leaving you, she whispered. Levi's jaw clenched. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do, she snapped. I can choose to stay, to fight, like you did for me. He dropped the knife and stood, too quickly, the chair scraping loud against the floor. This ain't about bravery, it's about odds. And those odds are worse every day we stay. From the top of the stairs came a soft voice. May. I'll go, she said. Her eyes were shadowed, lips trembling, but she stood tall. June turned. May, no. She's right, the girl said. They'll find us. They always do. If we run, maybe they won't hurt him. No one's getting left behind, Levi said sharply. That man, whoever he is, he doesn't get to win, not this time. May's face hardened, and for the first time, she looked older than her years. You don't know them. June crossed the room in 2 strides and took the girl's hand. We'll go, all of us, but together, always together. That sealed it. They packed within the hour. Levi loaded the wagon with a small trunk of supplies, food, water, spare boots. The 2 girls sat huddled under a blanket in the back, eyes peeking nervously from beneath its edge. June helped him hitch the mare, her movements quick, precise, trained. She'd come far from the girl he first found curled beneath his porch. As they turned onto the dirt trail, Levi glanced back at the house just once. The porch swing moved gently in the breeze, creaking like an old voice saying goodbye. They rode, in silence for the first hour, the land rolling flat and dry around them. Sagebrush dotted the hills like scars. Sweat ran down Levi's spine, but he didn't slow the horses. Not until the faint smell of smoke caught in his nose. He reined up. June looked over. What is it? He didn't answer, just stepped off the wagon, lifted his spyglass, and turned toward the southern ridge. Smoke, not from a cooking fire, too thick, too wide. And then he saw it. Riders, 4 of them, galloping fast, cutting across the plain with a speed that told him everything he needed to know. He climbed back aboard. "Hold on!" The horses screamed as he cracked the reins. The wagon jerked forward, bouncing hard over the dry trail. The girls in the back clung to each other, eyes wide with terror. June braced herself on the seat beside him. "They're coming," she said. "I know." The road twisted through a shallow canyon up ahead. If they could make it to the pass, there was a narrow trail into the rocks, one that a wagon could barely fit. Levi had used it once years ago to hide from a dust storm. If they could wedge the wagon in and take to the hills on foot, they might have a chance. But the riders were gaining. Levi turned to June. "Take the reins." "What?" "Take them!" She grabbed the lines as he stood and climbed into the back, pulling open a crate. He lifted out his long rifle, checked the chamber, and loaded 2 more rounds into the chamber. He took aim over the side rail and fired once. The shot cracked across the open plain, and one of the riders dropped. The others didn't flinch. They only sped up. He fired again, missed. Another shot. This one hit a horse in the shoulder. The beast stumbled, pitched forward, and threw its rider, but the other 2 pressed on. June screamed, jerking the reins as the wagon skidded sideways across a dry wash. The wheels groaned but held. "They're right behind us," she cried. Levi looked back. One of the remaining riders had drawn a pistol. He fired. The bullet struck the side of the wagon, splintering wood near Levi's shoulder. He ducked and fired back. Missed again. No time to reload. He reached into the crate, pulled out his revolver, and steadied himself. The pass was ahead. 50 yards. 30. The wagon wheels scraped rock. One of the girls in the back screamed as the wagon rocked dangerously, nearly tipping. June pulled left hard and they squeezed into the narrow cut of stone. The path was barely wide enough. Dust rose around them in choking clouds. Levi twisted back around, but the riders had slowed. The gap between the canyon walls was too narrow for their horses. They'd have to follow on foot. Levi jumped down. "Get the girls and run," he barked. "I'll hold them off." "No," June cried. "You come with us. I'll catch up. You promise." He looked at her, pain carved deep across his face. "Go." June didn't argue. She helped May and the little one down, slung the small bag over her shoulder, and disappeared into the rocks. Levi turned, loaded the revolver, and crouched behind the wagon. Seconds later, the first man rounded the bend on foot. It was the one from the night before, the collector. He saw Levi and smiled. "You're persistent," the man said. "But it's time you understand. Property's meant to be returned." Levi fired once, twice. The man dove behind a boulder. Another figure emerged, flanking from the side. Levi rolled behind the wheel and fired again, catching the second man in the leg. He dropped. But the collector was moving fast now, ducking low, eyes locked on Levi's position. Levi fired again. Empty. He ducked down and reached for the rifle. Too late. The collector lunged over the wagon and drove his boot into Levi's chest, knocking the wind from him. He loomed over Levi, pistol raised. "You could have walked away," he said. Levi looked up, unafraid. "So could you." And from behind the rocks, another shot. The collector jerked and stumbled. Another shot. His shoulder snapped back. He fell forward, blood blooming across his shirt. Behind him, June stood with the rifle trembling in her hands, eyes wild with terror and rage. Levi coughed, sat up slowly. "You were supposed to run." "I lied," she said. Together, they dragged the bodies away, hidden beneath brush. They buried them shallow. There wasn't time for more. When they found the girls again, it was nearly dusk. May ran to them, clutching. "Levi's arm. We heard the shots," she said. "We thought, it's over," Levi said. But even as he spoke, He knew it wasn't. When they reached Eagle Hollow 2 days later, the pastor took them in without questions. The mission was quiet, humble, but full of life. Children played in the yard. Women moved with purpose. And for the first time, Levi felt something more than just survival. He felt a beginning, but as he lay in bed that night, his side still sore from bruised ribs, he thought of the ledger, of the men who'd seen Briggs die, of the collector's final words. He knew there'd be more, but he also knew something else. He wasn't alone anymore. Eagle Hollow sat tucked beneath a rise of red rock mesas, quiet and removed from the chaos of the southern routes. The mission Levi had taken the girls to wasn't much more than a cluster of adobe buildings, whitewashed walls and sun-beaten shingles, but within its low walls, peace breathed like a living thing. There were no horses galloping toward them, no strangers watching from tree lines. For the first time since Levi had pulled June from the dust and seen the brands burned into May's wrist, they had shelter, food, and the sound of children's laughter echoing through the dusty yards. June sat on the porch of the mission with the youngest girl, Josie, combing dust and tangles out of her hair while the heat rolled in waves off the land. Her fingers worked slowly, rhythmically, and Josie leaned into her, half dozing as June hummed a lullaby she barely remembered from her own mother. May was inside helping the mission cook, and Levi, bruised ribs and all, was splitting logs beside the shed, even though Pastor Reuben had told him more than once to rest. But Levi wasn't a man built for idleness. Every swing of the axe was a refusal to let that Slava's voice echo in his mind, a refusal to forget the way June screamed when she thought he wouldn't come back, a refusal to allow what had happened to those girls to happen to anyone else. Reuben joined him mid-afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow with a cloth and carrying a tin cup of water. He handed it to Levi without a word. Levi drank deep, set it down, and leaned on the handle of the axe. "You trust the law around here?" Reuben nodded, sitting on a stump nearby. "Sheriff's a good man, hard, fair, but you're not asking about him." Levi looked out toward the edge of the canyon, where the trail dipped and vanished into low country. "I don't think that man was the top of the chain." Reuben said nothing, just waited. "There's others. I know it. Might not come today or tomorrow, might be months, but they'll come. You aiming to stop them?" "I can't live knowing they're still out there." Reuben nodded slowly. "I see it in you. Most men want peace. You want justice. I want both. But I'll take justice first." The old pastor folded his hands. "You think June and the girls are safe here?" "For now. And when the wind shifts," Levi's voice lowered, "then I'll make sure they're ready." "No. You were a girl who looked up." He rode out before the others woke, his silhouette framed by the growing light. A cloud of dust trailed behind him, but June stood still, watching until he vanished past the ridge. Back inside the mission, the morning bell rang. May stirred and stretched, light blooming across her face. "Is he gone?" she asked. June nodded. "He'll be back," May said confidently. And somehow, June knew she was right, because Levi wasn't just some cowboy who'd saved a girl on the side of the road. He was something rarer. He was a man who had decided to change the world, one broken chain at a time.